every writer has that challenge. You know, you get an idea, you feel like you understand something, and you try to put it in writing. And I have always found that I can grasp something a lot quicker than I can put it down on paper in a way that makes sense, you know, that unfolds. But that's one of the values of being able to do that, of writing things down, is it helps you get in touch with, you know, what do I think about this? And I do encourage people all the time to write. Maybe keep a journal, maybe keep some type of thing where you are talking to yourself about things that matter to you, things that you maybe don't understand. Try to work them out in your own thought. I find that to be very, very helpful. And it's therapeutic. A lot of the ideas that we carry, you know, when we were given them at a very early age. We absorb them just through culture, a lot of it. Things that we think are absolutely true, or things that we rebel against, maybe. When you get into the whole realm of religion, we ask the question, did Jesus, in his day, did he think of life after death like we do today, like the average Christian does today? And nobody really stops, and I shouldn't say nobody, but many of us do not stop and think about questions like that. The fact is, he didn't think of life after death like we do. The average Jew did not think of life after death like we do. The idea of resurrection came basically with the Pharisees. And even though in the gospel context, the Pharisees play a pretty prominent role, they were like Jesus' big enemy. But in history, in reality, the Pharisees didn't really come along till several hundred years after he was gone. They were around, but a very inconsequential organization. It was more the Sadducees who were, and the Sadducees were considered religious elitists. They did not believe in resurrection. They did not believe in life after death. They believed that when you died, you died. You were dead. You were actually a shade. You were a living being, but you lived in the belly of the earth in Sheol. And it didn't matter how good of a Jew you were, you know, through your whole life, everybody went to the same place. That's the way that people of Jesus' day thought of life after death. Didn't think of it the same way we do. But we have all this elaborate belief system that has come along, and we never ask, where did it come from? We just assume it came from people like Jesus, who is quoted saying things that support that. But the reason he says things that support that is because the authors made him say things that support that. It helps to understand the context that Jesus lived in. But what's important about Jewish thinking, life after death, they didn't put any emphasis on what happens when you die. All their emphasis was on what happens when you're alive, what happens when you're here. How are you conducting yourself here and now? And I think that is still the emphasis of Judaism today. It's not a lot of emphasis on what happens when you die. But that's the Christian thought, is it's all about that great reward and the great by and by. You know, when we pass from this plane, did we live a good life, and will we be given admission into the through the pearly gates and into that gated community we call heaven. So our focus really is on what happens after this life, and it is important how we conduct ourselves in this life. But that's a thought that Jesus didn't have, or we have to assume the average Jew of his day did not have. It was not part of their thinking. And so just to say, okay, how important is that whole thing to think about and to try to live my life around? we joke about things like this. You know, am I going to make it to heaven? Or I had a conversation with someone the other day that it was not a joke. It was a conversation that was, the person questioned whether they were going to make it to heaven. And I said, I don't think you've got any problem, because I don't. You know, I think we're all going to have a wonderful experience when we step from this body, regardless of who we were during this life. I think the greatest punishment that we will experience is in that life review that we will probably have, and we will realize that we could have done better. We could have lived our life better. But if I am an eternal being, how much importance would I place on a single life, on one life experience? You know, how much does that determine how good of a soul I am? We're all good souls. We're all expressions of the infinite. So we need to challenge some of the ideas that we carry. Just look at some of the things that we carry and believe in, that we've adopted, even from the New Thought community. Because to me, I found that the whole idea of soul evolution was a hindrance. It makes a lot of sense to a lot of people that I'm here to learn, I'm here to evolve, and all of that. But the more I thought about that, the more I thought, if I'm an expression of God, does that mean that I'm incomplete? As an expression of God, am I incomplete? And that would make no sense to me. If I'm image and likeness of God, I'm incomplete. I'm not finished yet. And that's on the spiritual level, I am complete. So I have come to that and then thought about my life from that perspective. If I am whole, why do I make the choices I make? Why would I make a choice to do this or that or whatever? I mean, that's becomes the new standard, that you rethink things instead of saying, well, I messed up because, or I had that bad relationship because I'm an evolving soul. There were lessons for me to learn. And I don't think that there are any lessons that any soul can learn from any relationship, except the relationship you have with yourself and the relationship you have with your maker, your source. That the closer you get to that, the more you realize, and that's kind of what I want to talk about in picking up again the complete soul, is gaining perspective. I am a spiritual being having this human experience, but I act as if I'm a human being seeking to become more spiritual. And it's exactly the opposite. It's exactly backwards. So we have to answer some questions if we adopt that type of thought. Well, how come I feel so inadequate and all? And a process like I'm talking about here, this 5 steps, is just another way to help focus our attention on the fact that we are spiritual beings. We are having a relationship with this material world. We are influencing it in ways that show up as our experience. And so, do we have any say about that? I think we do. And sometimes we just need to get back to the drawing board and, you know, say, what is going on? So we pick up a system like this, and this may or may not appeal to you. It doesn't appeal to everybody. I understand that. I've gotten several really good comments from our viewers, from our YouTube viewers, about this. Some people are very appreciative of being reminded of something they already know. And that's really what so much of spiritual education is. It's just a reminder of what we already know, what we know at the deepest level. And that's, again, comes back to the idea that I think we're already complete. We've just forgotten that. So the first step was to form a clear picture of your desire, with the understanding that by so doing, you impress your desire upon the creative life force. This understanding takes the first step out of the region of fantasy. So we're always using our faculty of imagination. We call it the third eye. It's the vision that we're holding. And as we have talked about, that is scattered often. You know, the view we hold of ourselves, of our life, is often scattered. Is often how we feel about ourselves and our life is often determined by events that we'll forget about in 2 weeks. It just, you know, how we feel today is generated by something that popped up, that happened, that, you know, I wasn't even thinking about maybe. And so my whole quality of life goes down as a result of my responding to that. And I totally understand why we do this, how we do it. But what we're doing here is looking at what is this thing we call imagination and how are we to use it. So when I find myself diving down into a lower level, I'm using this faculty I'm talking about, this faculty of vision, but I'm using it against myself. So by defining, by creating a picture of the direction I want to go with my life in any area of life, or my life as a whole, I have a standard that I can bring myself back to that standard. So it helps in that regard. Step 2 is know that you're working with law. And we talk about this in the sense that, is your life as it is an accident? Why is your life manifesting specifically to you, not to somebody else? Why are you having your particular experience? And we have to say, or we will benefit by saying, that it's based on law. That I'm getting overall in my life what I expect, or what I'm envisioning, what I'm envisioning. So there's a connection between how I think, what I see, and what I experience. So that's law. And it's important for us to grasp that idea, because if it is law, if I'm saying 2 and 2 is 5, I'm violating the law of mathematics. All I have to do is learn how the law works, and I can get the right answer. So that's the value of understanding from this perspective. Know that you're working with law, with calm expectation of a corresponding result. You know that all necessary conditions will come about in proper order. So it's a planting of a seed, and knowing that you are cooperating with the whole growth process, and that you don't make the seed grow, but you plant it. You play that role. You enter your daily routine with the calm assurance that conditions are either present already or will soon present themselves. If you do not see evidence at once, know that the spiritual prototype, that is your desire, is already in existence. So that's saying that the vision that you hold is a real thing. It's a pattern, it's a prototype. And that's not something that everybody will embrace, because you'll hear somebody say, oh, that's just your imagination. It's a figment of your imagination or your daydreaming. Well, what is that? What are we using when we are daydreaming? What is that faculty? Why do we have it? Why do we have it above all other animals? It doesn't appear that animals have the kind of imagination that we have. You don't see beagles flying in outer space, at least according to their will. You may see one shot up there as a guinea pig kind of thing. But animals don't invent things like we do. We have the ability to envision things that don't exist. One of George's examples is, you take a chunk of iron and you put it in water, and what happens? It sinks to the bottom instantly. But if you forge that chunk of iron into the hull of a ship, you can take a pretty heavy chunk of iron and it'll float. Because we have the ability to do things that don't exist in nature, to create things that don't naturally occur. And building ships and airplanes and automobiles and things of this nature, it's unique to the human experience. We have a faculty that is not shared by the animal kingdom. And people will say, well, yeah, animals get creative. You'll see a chimp sticking a stick in an anthill and pulling out the ants and eating them. Well, you could do that too if you want to, but any human being that did that would not be considered too brilliant. So animals have somewhat of an ability to imagine. There's no doubt about it. Your cat, they know how to get their way, and they're very imaginative. They're very creative in doing that. Our cat gets us up pretty much every morning. I think 4 o'clock she started this morning, because and she will use different techniques, to cause that to happen. But would I put her in a category of Albert Einstein or even myself? I am more mad because I can outsmart that cat eventually. Take me a while, but I will do it. But you understand what I'm saying is when Jesus said foxes have holes and or dens, holes, and birds have nests, what he's saying here is the animal kingdom is predictable. They are programmed to create a den, to build a certain nest. You can go out and find a bird nest, and you can tell the kind of bird that made it. If you find a robin's nest, for example, we all kind of know what those look like. You know that a sparrow didn't do it. A sparrow doesn't have the imagination. A dove didn't do it. A dove seems like it has no imagination when it comes to building nests. They're just flimsy sticks stuck together, but somehow they keep multiplying. But you can predict a dove and an egg. You can say, I know what kind of nest you're going to build one day, because you are programmed to do that, and you will do it exactly like all the other doves. Every stick won't be in the same place, but human beings are not like that. We don't have that same, we have a different ability, and that's imagination. So it's very important to hold that, and that tool that can work for us can also work against us in a very deadly way, devastating way. It can destroy our lives. And I think you could interview any person going through a perpetual tough time in life, and you could learn pretty quickly why they're going through that level of experience by their conversation. It doesn't take long to pick up on people's energy by what they say and what they talk about and what they think about all day long. So it's important to make that connection. Step 4 is wait until some circumstance pointing in the desired direction begins to show itself. It may be small, but it is the type and not the magnitude of the circumstance that is important. This is the first step of sprouting the seed. So we're talking about making a connection between what we see in our mind and how to bring that into play, into manifestation. It's a process, exactly like planting a seed. That it's a process that we're not responsible for creating or doing. We're simply responsible for planting the seed or holding the idea and staying with that. And that's the challenge, as you know. You set a goal for yourself, and you may be thinking about that one day and lose it totally. In the next few minutes, you're just all over the place. So step 5 is what we're talking about today. Do calmly without excitement, whatever the circumstance seems to require. This will lead to the further unfolding of other circumstances in the same direction. By addressing each one as it appears, you're moving step by step toward the accomplishment of your desire. So he's saying as you hold this vision and opportunities arise for you to act in that direction, take those opportunities, do that. But don't try to dig up things and make things happen, is what he's saying. Go with the flow. I like that idea. Go with the flow. And I use the picture of dominoes. Just we've all stacked dominoes, and you push one and all the others begin to fall. That's the idea, the thought of what we're looking at here. So we don't try to force anything. We are holding a vision, and we're doing it steadily, and we're working, anytime an opportunity comes up to advance the thing that we are working on, the direction we're working on, we take that opportunity, but we don't get too excited about anything else. Life is all about transformation. A seed is dropped in the ground in one form and it emerges as another. Unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone, but if it dies, it bears much fruit. That's really what we're doing here. To hold a vision, we are agreeing to allow ourselves to die to everything unlike that vision, if that makes sense. Anything that may be resisting that vision, like maybe we were raised thinking we're not good enough to have the life that we want, or go in the direction that we want to go. Maybe I'm too old to do that. Maybe I can't say, looking around, that any of us would say I'm too young to do it. But we could come up with all kinds of reasons why that won't work for us. And so we just need to realize that we're dying. We're allowing ourselves to die to that level of self that says that's not possible, or it shouldn't happen, or it's not necessary, or it's too good to be true, or whatever. But has anybody given up, we're all older here, has anybody given up the desire to have a better life in whatever form that may be? You may not be out trying to make $1 million or starting a new career, and maybe you are. It doesn't really matter. We all have goals in terms of wanting a better life, wanting a more peaceful life. Maybe we have a health challenge. That's more likely with people of our what do I want to say, not venue, but anyway, our age bracket. We all have aches and pains, and so maybe the goal is to be free of that. And you have to die to the self in pain. You have to die to that part of you that associates. If you're saying, oh, my aching back, for example, well, you're saying that aching back is yours. What if you started saying, that's not my aching back, it's somebody else's? But to associate with it, to claim it, my aching back, we just stop using that kind of language. We start thinking of ourselves in a different way. I'm a person without an aching back. Begin to envision stuff like that. So we're not talking about just, all these high goals in terms of that maybe we had when we were younger. We all have goals. We all have things we would like to change. So you can apply this to anything. The manifestation process is about dying to one state of being so that another may come forth. As you move from where you are to where you want to be, you are to release the old and take on the new. And that's a pretty important concept. What you will find is you can tell you're holding on to something when you rehearse it with somebody else. Somebody says, how you doing today? Most of us will say, I'm doing great. How you really doing? And then you tell them how you're really doing. It's like a knee-jerk response is, I'm really doing great. But am I really doing great? And that's what we want to do. We want to get to the point where we can actually honestly respond to that question. I am doing great. And that's, I've shared this story before. Beth and I visited a church in St. Joseph, Missouri, as we were guests, and a couple sat down behind us. They didn't know each other, or they knew each other, but they were not together. But one came first, then another came, said, how you doing? The person responded, I'm doing great. And pretty soon I heard the first one say, how are you really doing? And the thing that struck me was, okay, we were in this unity church. You're not ever supposed to say, I'm not doing so well. You're always supposed to say, I'm doing great. That's a positive way, the positive approach. But what was going on there is, okay, I'm responding like I'm culturally supposed to, but I'm not really feeling that. I'm not really there. So that's what we want to do. Is it would be better to say, you know, I'm having a hard time, but I'm working on it. I'm trying to figure out how to get through this. It would be better to have an honest response. And I'm not saying share all your aches and pains and problems with the world, but keep that kind of thought in mind, that you're doing this not for other people, but for yourself. You're not trying to prove anything to anybody but yourself. And you're not really even trying to prove anything to yourself. You're trying to move your life into a direction that is beneficial to you, that is more helpful. And so that there's all kinds of levels of goal setting, and let's just keep that in mind. Watching the new emerge can be an exciting process. When you see evidence of your desire beginning to manifest, it's easy to become overzealous in your attempt to hurry things along. I've had people call and say, would you pray for so-and-so? They're going through a very difficult time. And I'll say, of course. And I'll get a call back maybe a day or so later. Their problem is solved. Everything's great. And so they say, thank you for your prayer, and make that connection between those two things. But then maybe 2 days later, that person has another problem. There's some other thing going on or whatever. I mean, that's not a one-size-fits-all forever kind of thing. Life is an ongoing thing. We don't want to give the impression that, like if you're praying for yourself, trying to get past some pain and it goes away, and you feel like you're making progress, and then it comes back, and you feel like a failure. So it's an interesting process that goes on. It's not the outcome, it's not the way you express, it's not the lack of pain that makes you a success. It's you holding the vision of yourself as a whole person. Your ability to do that even when the pain comes back. That's holding the vision. You know, that's where we have to shine if we're going to make this if we're going to cooperate with spiritual law. You don't judge your success or failure by the moment. You judge your success or failure by how you see yourself, how you continuously see yourself. And we all have things that we would like to get rid of or change. But just because they're there doesn't mean you're a failure. So that's a very important thing. Watching the new emerge, you can get all excited, like the pain's gone today. So, you know, it's a new day. Everything I did worked. Well, tomorrow it comes back. So I go into this depression, you know, not necessarily a depression, but a negative thought about, well, I guess this doesn't work. It's as I hold this higher vision, I see my life unfolding better ways. Because if you respond to a positive outcome, a positive result, and you think you've mastered something, you'll probably be proven wrong. And you'll need to go back to the drawing board. And that's very discouraging to most of us. We think this spiritual thing doesn't really work necessarily. It doesn't work like we hope it will. But as long as we have a physical body, we're going to have challenges. And you can argue with that if you want to. But Jesus had them until the very last day. You know, and he's considered a spiritual master. External action can be addictive. Things begin to happen and you want them to continue, so you start trying to push the river, as someone put it. The writer of Psalms also warned against overzealousness when he wrote, "Zeal for thy house has consumed me." Have you ever met a religious zealot? They consume everything around them and consume themselves mainly. But Troy is just saying, be mindful of this. Be mindful of this. Don't get too elated over your successes. Don't get too depressed over your failures. Just be steady. Keep walking. Somebody asked Socrates, how do you get to Mount Olympus? He said, just make sure every step is in that direction. And that's a pretty wise answer. Every step toward your desired good offers something of value, even in those times when nothing seems to be happening. That's important. Hold your vision in an attitude of expectation, enthusiasm, and in the knowledge that everything is working together for your good in right and perfect order. This is moving through our life with calm expectation. We want that peace, and that peace is always present as long as we're not trying to push the river. All right? Hope you got something out of this series, and we will probably pick it up again a couple of years from now. But next week I'm going to start, as I said, just kind of reviewing some of the complete soul ideas in the complete soul, not necessarily in the order they're written, but in the order that questions have come up through the years. All right, thanks for coming out. Have a happy Father's Day and whatever you're involved in, and hope to see you next week.
You've been watching a talk given by Reverend Doug Bottorff here at Independent Unity in beautiful Grand Junction, Colorado. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us spread our message. If you would like to support us, you can do so by clicking the button in the right-hand corner of the video screen. We greatly appreciate your support. Thanks again for watching.